The current trends are basically reflective of. It's probably easy to answer that question and what's bringing about these changes, what's happening in the world of banking. What's happening in the world of banking is a response to the financial crisis, clearly, and part of that response has been regulatory requirements. The amount of regulations that banks have to face internationally is unprecedented. We have a new version of Basel coming out. We have capital adequacy regulations coming out. We have all sorts of audit and compliance and requirements of banks to be able to prove their level of transparency, their level of corporate governance. And all these regulations combined are driving a far more strategic view of the bank in terms of their overall liquidity, in terms of their overall risk management capability, and just in terms of their internal compliance and governance. So how that translates into the current trends in data management is the process and infrastructure of managing data is changing from not just being able to ensure that the business units have the data they need and the processing performance that they need, but also there's a far more strategic data management requirement now. Can the Chief Risk Officer implement corporate risk strategies down to the transaction level for risk-based pricing, risk-based performance review of products and certain transactions? Can the Chief Financial Officer gain clear metrics of his financial strategies and his capital strategies down to the business unit level? Is each controller able to report up performance metrics that gives commentary to the finance officer and likewise to the risk officer that at the market-facing business processes, the corporate strategies are basically being implemented? And obviously these two requirements from risk and finance transpose into the operations component of a bank. Can the Chief Operations Officer service this need, service this demand for strategic top-down transparency from a data and information capture perspective? So the trend is basically I have to be able to enable business to perform at a much higher rate of velocity, in a much more competitive environment, in an environment that is far more restricted from a regulatory perspective, and at the same time, I have to be able to service the more strategic component of bank-wide views that are not based on aggregated values, but also being able to be drilled down. So the trend itself is basically one of being able to capture a very high volume of data, a very low level of granularity, retaining that data, and at the same time being able to provision that data to the business unit level applications as well as to the enterprise level applications for things like liquidity management, stress testing, regulatory reporting, and so on. The technology profile is critical. For a long time, I feel that people have thought technologies are interchangeable. Data management technologies are interchangeable, almost to the point where you could have personal preference, or as some consultancies have said, we're technology agnostic. When we're looking to build business processes, we're technology agnostic. To me, you can't do that anymore. Not with the demands of data right now, not with what I've just spoken about in terms of business unit performance and enterprise views. There is a specific technology requirement, and that profile is the ability to not just integrate the data. It's not just a question of having one large repository and then you're good. No, that data has to be consumable. It has to be accessible to the business users. It has to provision the analytics and the applications within the process by which business needs to perform, within the process framework for businesses to be able to perform. Certain users have a very low latency for data requirements. Other business users are okay with running a very complex query and it runs overnight. One data environment has to be able to perform and support all those divergent processes and latency needs, as well as give people and their applications the data in the format that their application layer and their reporting layer demands it to be. That is a critical requirement. It is a very complicated requirement. And a data management solution has to be built and implemented with the consumption in mind. Now, that suggests that you have to rip everything out and put in one great big huge environment that does all of those things. The answer to that is no. If the vendor is saying that that's what is required, then you're basically buying into an endless project that will never get you to where you want to be. Another critical technology solution profile has to be, this technology can be implemented on a use case basis. My current urgent need, for example, might be liquidity risk management. Can I get the data that I need for liquidity risk management? Can I get the processing performance that I need for liquidity risk management? Do I get the business functions within the application needed to perform liquidity risk management? Then, the environment, the data environment that supports that liquidity risk application should also be extendable for the next use case, where in the next use case, where it might be credit risk, is able to fully leverage the investments already made for liquidity risk. And by investments I mean in terms of the data sourcing, the data retention, the business rules. So therefore you leverage more and more on each incremental investment up to the point where use case N is almost completely painless to implement in terms of all the data is already there. The infrastructure for sourcing is already there. The data quality requirements are already there. You're just provisioning the same data that you are already for several other applications to a new one. This brings about the third critical technology profile, which is extendability of the data environment and a rules-based environment that has the ability to enable business users to create new rules. Now, what I mean by that is rules around adjustments. I capture data from a source system, it comes in, I need to make an adjustment to that data entry before I can provision that to my applications. The adjustment process must not be manual. The adjustment process must not be opaque in terms of when one person does it, nobody else knows that it's happened, or no one knows the consequences of that adjustment other than the person who did it. It has to be transparent, it has to be auditable, and it has to be known by all the people who are affected by it. Likewise, rules around applications. Nobody, well, not nobody, but very rarely does anybody buy an application, they implement it, and then their business users use it as is 100% without any customization. That very rarely happens, if at all. The process of configuring an application has to be minimal in terms of business impact. It has to be minimal in terms of overhead burdens, in terms of programming and so on. And ideally, it should be able to be performed not by programmers, but by the business users who know exactly what they want the application to do. So it has to be, the data management environment has to support the ability to custom configure new rules and applications in the same environment that the data exists. The data has to be able to be supportive of the data consumption needs of the application landscape, and it has to be able to be implemented on a use case basis, incrementally, where each new increment leverages the previous investments and the previous use cases. Yeah, the buy and build. It's I remember Oracle's co-president Mark Hurd presenting something at a financial services summit in New York, and he recounted a conversation that he had with a CIO of a tier 1 bank, and the conversation went something along the lines of, well, Mr. Hurd, you know, how many IT resources do you have, development resources do you have in Oracle for financial services? And the response was something in the region of 15,000 people. And the banker's response was, well, I have 20,000. I have more resources than you. What is it that Oracle can do for me when I can build my own bank, I can build my own applications and so on? The fact of the matter is this. A large percentage of an existing bank's IT budget and resources are dedicated to maintaining the status quo, making sure that the bank can operate tomorrow as well as today, rather than developing net new capabilities. And the other consideration is this. Our focus on a data management solution is one that is based on a footprint of over 11,000 financial services clients. And what that experience and coverage has translated into is the awareness of what truly is the big picture around banking technology. It's not just about the reporting layer, it's not just about the application layer, it's not just about the data layer. It's about making all those components work together seamlessly to affect a positive business change, a decision advantage, enabling the guy on the ground facing the market to make the best decision that he possibly can make based on all the information, contextualized that in a way that's relevant to the decision he has to make, with data that he has confidence in, that's timely and accurate and complete. So, having said all that, we have to also be sensitive to the fact that clients do build their own applications. They do have their own versions and visions of infrastructure. And so a data management solution within that buy and build decision framework has to be able to be one of overlay as opposed to overhaul. We can work with lots of different, a data management solution should be able to work with a complex ecosystem of other applications, whether they're other vendor applications or bank-built applications. But the data management layer has to be able to equally provision to different types of applications delivered in different ways, as I've said, either by vendors or by banks who build their own. However, the focus should always be, am I delivering for my data management solution the single best data environment for my landscape, for my application landscape? Do I have a better way of being able to build a data management solution that provisions data for risk, for finance, for compliance and customer? Or is there one out in the market that's already built with a full semantic model, with a full physical model, with a full data quality library? And if there is, what's the cost comparison between my building all of that or just buying it?